Hi, welcome back. I'm Samantha Lee Wright. I'm a childbirth educator, I'm a doula, and I'm host of the Essential Oil Revolution podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. And if you tuned in to the last video number 1, we talked all about things you can do in pregnancy to prepare your body for childbirth. In this video number 2, we're going to talk all about how to write an effective birth plan. I know this task is really daunting to a lot of people, and there's a lot of myths and misconceptions surrounding this area, so I really want to dive in and address it. But if you haven't already, go back and watch video number 1 so that you don't miss out on some really good advice of things you can start implementing right now to prepare your body for a good childbirth experience. So let's dive in and talk about birth plans. Now, when I was pregnant with my first child, I'll be honest, I was totally obsessed with this idea of writing the perfect birth plan. And even when I would work with doula clients and, we would talk about what they would want in labor and in birth, the idea of the birth plan would always come up, and I always thought it was one of the most important documents that I had to help a client in labor. Well, I still believe that birth plans are very valuable documents to create, but I've really changed the way I teach and think about birth plans. I think that birth plans are wonderful tools for pregnant parents to create while they're pregnant. And I think they're amazing tools to create and to bring in to talk with your care provider about what your wishes are for birth. But the thing that I've let go of in the past couple months working with my clients is this idea that the birth plan is actually a helpful document to bring into labor. I do think that birth plans can be useful to bring into labor to quickly allow your nurses to understand a little bit about you. But honestly, the most beneficial aspect of writing a birth plan all takes place prenatally, all takes place before birth. Because the biggest benefit of writing a birth plan is, for one, it allows you to educate yourself about the birth process and about hospital interventions and options and alternatives. But more importantly, it gives you the opportunity to get to know your provider, what options they're willing to give you, and their general attitude. A lot of people think that a birth plan is a document that's written in stone, and the fact that they've written certain things in the birth plan will guarantee that they happen in labor. And this is just not the reality and not how we should be approaching birth and birth plans. But let's talk about that process of researching and understanding what your options are in birth. Now, in this video, I don't have time to break down every single routine or intervention, what your options are, what your alternatives are. That would be a very long video course. Instead, I'm going to give you sort of the foundation of how to go about this process. So the first step of the process of writing a birth plan is to make a really long first draft. This first draft is just you writing down every single thing that you want to understand about what your specific hospital environment is like. With that first draft, that gives you a list of questions and conversation starters to go in and talk to your care provider with. But when you talk to your care provider, pay attention to their attitude and to the answers that they're giving you. If you go in and say, I'd really like to have freedom of movement, and I'd really like the lights to be dim, and I'd really like music playing, and your care provider goes, oh yeah, no problem, then that's something that you don't really need to put in your final birth plan, because if there's no resistance, there's not going to be any resistance to that stuff when you go in on Labor Day. If your care provider is like, ooh, I don't know about that, then that'll give you pause and you can talk to your care provider about that. Because if you're given resistance when you bring up that kind of stuff in pregnancy, you're going to get resistance in the hospital too, even if it's in your birth plan, unless you go through and talk through it with your provider and make sure that you're both on the same page. here's just a really quick rundown of all the possible interventions or routines that I could think of that you might come across in your specific hospital setting. Now, just forewarning, this list is very long and maybe a little overwhelming. And this is not the list of what you should put on your birth plan. This is just a lot of items that you might want to think about or might want to ask your provider about. First, you might want to talk to your care provider about what the induction policy is during pregnancy. How far past the due date will they let you go, and how flexible is this? Some other things to ask are, do you want to wear your own clothes instead of the hospital gown? Is intermittent fetal monitoring used, or is continuous fetal monitoring used? Are there any options for portable monitoring? Are IV saline locks required upon admittance? Are women allowed to eat food in labor? Are IV fluids automatically given upon admittance? How often are cervical checks performed, and by whom? Is Pitocin routinely administered during labor or after a certain number of hours in labor? If labor is slow, what options are available? Is it routine to artificially rupture the amniotic sac in labor? Are birth support allowed in the room, such as a doula or other family members? Is freedom of movement like a ball or walking encouraged in labor? Or do they prefer you stay in bed? What positions are allowed for pushing, and what positions is your care provider comfortable delivering in? Are showers or baths available for your comfort? Is self-directed pushing allowed, or is coached pushing the norm? Are there any alternative pain management options available, such as nitrous oxide, sterile water papules, or a TINS machine? Is immediate skin-to-skin with your baby allowed after delivery? Would you like to save your cord blood for banking? Would you like to save your placenta? Are you planning to breastfeed? Do nurses routinely give bottles or pacifiers to the baby? Can the baby room in with you? In the event of a C-section, are the following options available? Immediate skin-to-skin with mom and baby, or partner and baby? Can the curtain be removed if you'd like to see the birth? Delayed cord clamping? Vaginal swabbing to colonize baby with healthy microbiome? What are the routine care procedures for the baby, and can any of them be delayed until after breastfeeding and bonding have been established? Common ones include Hep B vaccine, erythromycin eye drops, vitamin K injection, and newborn bathing. Whoa, overwhelmed much? Yeah, I was the same way. When I was pregnant, I wanted to know every option and every sort of routine that I would come up against, because it's hard to understand this stuff. For your care provider and for the nurses working, it's just everyday stuff. They know what to expect, but you don't know what to expect, and you don't know what your options are. So it's important to go through this list and talk to your care provider and ask them what standards are. In the end, you might be surprised. You might be able to mark through every single one of these because your care provider is like, oh yeah, no problem, we do that all the time. But you might be at a place where your care provider is like, nope, not allowed, nope, not allowed, nope, not allowed. And if that's the case, then you can either consider a new care provider, or you can really use your time in pregnancy with your care provider to work through why they feel that way and what alternatives and what options you can compromise with. A good birth plan is always super short, super simple, and always written from a place of compassion and cooperation and from the heart, not from fear or mistrust. So let's talk about how to do that. Like I said, you first want to start with a very long first draft. Bring that into your care provider, have that conversation, and see what you can take out. In the end, the actual document that you want to use for your birth plan should be very short and very simple, because you don't want to have any surprises in childbirth. So keep it very short, very simple. You want to have it so that a nurse can just look at it and see what they need to change about the way they admit you or the way they treat you in labor. You want to sort of leave out the more fluffy, feel-good stuff like, give me encouragement, give me freedom of movement. That's the kind of stuff that if your provider's not resistant, then you can just get that stuff when you get there, especially if you have a doula or a birth partner that understands what your wishes are. Another tip too that's becoming more popular these days is to make a visual birth plan. So if you just Google the term visual birth plan icons, then you can find these really awesome graphics that have a lot of these interventions and wishes just as these little one-word symbols. And nurses are loving these because they can just quickly look at your birth plan and see visually what you do and don't want. So again, just Google the term visual birth plan icons and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. They're super cool. Other things you want on your birth plan are your name, your partner's name, your blood type, and if you have a doula or extra birth support, have their name in there as well. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video where we'll talk even more about how to go about choosing your care provider and creating this relationship of trust and understanding and cooperation. Before you go, I'd love for you to think of just one person that you can share this video course with. Do you know anyone who's expecting or maybe that works in the childbirth field who could really benefit from the lessons that we're sharing here? So before you go, please share this video with one friend who you'd like to help.